Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode one of these years. And of course, Nick Baumgardner, along with Colton Pouncy. Lions offseason rolls on. The NFL draft. Colton here in Detroit, of all places, is about 3 weeks away. Less than a month, anyway. We're almost there. I'm ready to go. No Chris Burke today. He's in final editing stages of The Beast, which
Beast
I don't
Hell.
even know, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's what he said. Beast Hell. I don't even know what section he's on at this point, but there's a lot of words being edited. And that's
He's
on the
deep in
way
it.
here. That's on the way here soon, as Dane has been in the weeds and not really heard from by anyone for a couple days or weeks. So it's that time of year as well. And yeah, like Colton, today we're going to talk a little draft, but also you were at owners meetings. There was it in Orlando?
Orlando, yeah.
Yeah. So how was Orlando there? I've got some. I spent a lot of time in Orlando, and none of it very fun in my efforts over the years.
Yeah, it's not like I mean, unless you're going to like Disney or like one of the
Yeah,
parks, it's
it's
not like a destination. But like,
no.
I mean, I was happy to escape the weather in Michigan for like a good 4 days there. That was real
Yeah, that's a good
nice.
point. Yeah, it's been
And I
terrible.
spent like some time at the pool at the Ritz-Carlton Orlando. So I mean, I really can't complain. I was at a 5-star
Yeah,
hotel.
good point.
So yeah, good trip overall. Got to hear from Rod Wood, team president, Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes. They're just kind of talking about the offseason and kind of what's ahead, what they've done. It was really the first time I got a chance to talk to some of those guys since free agency, which is really
Yeah.
cool to kind of get their insight. Um, they're really happy with the haul they brought in. I think Holmes referred to some of those guys as plan A options. I think that's probably the biggest difference from this year to years past. It's like, yeah, we know how they operate. They kind of tend to stay in that like tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 kind of range. But um, for them to say like, yeah, we're actually getting plan A options now because of the team success we've had this past year. We have like this kind of proof of concept in place right now, and
Hmm.
we're able to land some of our top targets. I thought that was kind of interesting and different than what it's been in the past. And yeah, they're just excited for the year ahead. Feel like these moves will help them get closer to a Super Bowl, which is, we can finally talk about that, right? That's kind of like the
Yeah,
big deal. It's
100%.
like they are a Super Bowl contender right now. Like it's not just, yeah, let's try to win the division. Let's try to get a playoff win. Like no, like they're trying to win the whole thing, and they think these moves help them get a little closer.
What was sort of Campbell's message or takeaway? He talked there for quite a while, whatever it was that day. It's just now his third owners meetings. Yeah. So, I mean, like, comfortable in his shoes and all that. What was his sort of message, and what did he kind of talk about on his end? I know that Rod Wood always talks about, like, alternate uniforms and probably draft stuff that's coming up in terms of hosting, but I'm curious what Campbell had to say.
Yeah, a couple things kind of stood out to me. He's was going to be asked about the NFC Championship loss and
Right.
decision
Yeah.
making and just how tough that game was for him. But he seemed like really energized, and I'm sure that took some time.
Hmm.
I don't know how much he watched the Super Bowl or how much he kind of got into that game. It's probably tough to watch, but he seems like he's kind of taking the time off needed to kind of recharge and get going again. I don't think he needed a ton of time, to be honest with you, because he's kind of all right, on to the next
Yeah.
type of guy. Um, but he definitely looked recharged and energized about the season ahead. Big smiles, talking about the team, like grinning from ear to ear. So he seems like ready to go. One of the things he said he wants to do when the team all gets back together is watch um,
The
the
loss.
loss to
Yeah.
the 49ers, rewatch it as a team. He already did that with his assistants and his staff and said they only watched the second half because that's kind of where things went wrong. They know what went right. They were scoring points in the first half. Things kind of fell apart. So just kind of learning from your mistakes and trying to grow from it. I think that's all you can do after a game like that. I still think that experience, I kind of liken it to last season, 2022 season, where they didn't make the playoffs, but that win in Green Bay was so important to kind of set up, what they were doing at
Yeah.
the end of the year. And I also think not making the playoffs that year kind of helped them keep perspective because everyone was hyping them up even last year around this time, saying, oh, yeah, they're going to win the division. They're going to do this, they're going to do that. But they could always point back and say, guys, we missed the playoffs. Like, we're not even a playoff team. So let's like
Right.
pump the brakes a little bit. Let's make sure we're doing what we need to do to ensure that we get there. And so I kind of liken that to this loss, and they're kind of using that to fuel them and to motivate them. I don't think they'll be complacent this offseason training, just knowing how close they were last year. I think if anything, it's going to motivate them to get further along. And so that was kind of one thing that stood out to me. The other thing is like Campbell wants some competition, like with this
Hmm.
roster, and I think they're
Yeah.
finally
Right.
at a place where like we can bring in a Meek Robinson, we can bring in a Carlton Davis, we can have Emmanuel Mosley still on the roster and say, you guys may the best man win. They have the depth now at certain positions to kind of have those battles and let guys duke it out. Whereas in the past, it's like, okay, this guy's clearly a starter. This guy's clearly a number two. I think they're kind of blurring the lines with that depth now. I think that's something that Campbell really wanted to see this offseason specifically. So, yeah, between just moving on from that loss and now the roster and how healthy it is right now, I think they're ready to go and feeling pretty confident about things.
It's good. It's good to hear. Not surprising at all that he's bouncing back and back. He's himself, right? Like it's not.
Right.
He's not changed. Not surprising that that hasn't happened. That's the case. But like, it's important to note that that was a horribly tough loss in the worst place on the schedule to lose. Right? No one wants to lose right before the Super Bowl, and those losses sometimes can change coaches or they can impact people in ways that not the same situation, but when Brandon Staley blew that lead, whatever it was with the Chargers, never the same. Was
No.
never the same guy, right? I think this is where maybe Dan being a former player, maybe it helps that the mindset of, because that's what it seems like he's, hey, we were this close and we're going to focus on why we weren't one step over the line. Like, let's not even worry about how we got up 24-0. What the hell happened in us falling apart? Like, what do we need to do to fix the leaks? Because obviously we have leaks here, right? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that is really the only way to approach it. It's the only way you can approach it because it's still like a continued mission of whatever. And it's like you said earlier, Colton. It's basically bleeding into the previous year, where it's just like that mission from the previous year was, hey, you got right there in Green Bay, you ruined Aaron Rodgers' exit, all that whole that good stuff. But then you got to build the next year and the next year. And now, yeah, you said at the very beginning there, the next thing is the Super Bowl, like it or not. And like that's pretty
I
wild.
mean,
But like, I mean, here we are.
we're here.
And yeah, right, we are here.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy to think about. But that's really what it is. And I think that's what it's been wild to me too to hear. And we haven't talked too much in the last couple of weeks, and we touched on this some at the combine, I guess. But like running the ball is in vogue again, Colton. I don't know if you know that.
How
I
about
know you
that?
know that. Every time I'm on a draft radio call somewhere, wherever, I get asked about like, here in this market, whatever team, they want to run the ball now. They want to change everything they're doing and recalibrate their offensive line and find a way to run the ball. Suddenly everyone needs a center. Everyone needs multiple tackles, right?
Right.
I mean, it's not just the Lions. I don't want to say it's just the Lions because the other teams that made the Final Four have something to do with that too. They all ran the ball well too. But that's also been something that I think has taken some adjusting to, but that's real now too. All the way real. The Lions are being copied in some ways, correct? Would you agree
A
with
lot
that?
of ways. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the Lions have the best backfield in the NFL. I think that's pretty obvious to say with Gibbs
Yeah.
and Montgomery. And I think teams, it is a copycat league. And something I asked Rod Wood at the owners meeting is like, did you have teams kind of reaching out to you to ask about your success and Dan Campbell and maybe just kind of trying to replicate that in their own way?
Right.
And his answer was, yeah, we had some teams reach out, but there's only one Dan Campbell, so good luck. Which I thought was a great line. So shout out Rod for that.
Oh, Rod.
But yeah, I mean, like teams are going to try to copy success in this league, and like even last year during this time, we were talking about Bijan, and like
Yeah.
maybe it is a good idea to get another running back in here. Um, a lot of people were like, "Oh, they already have Jamal, they already have DeAndre Swift, they have a good offensive line." It's like, well, no, they do, but like you want to maximize that ability, and I think that's what they did last season. That's why they went out and added Dave Montgomery. That's why they went out and drafted Jameer Gibbs, and now they have the best rushing offense or one of the best rushing offenses in the NFL. And a lot of teams are seeing that success and saying, "Man, how do we get a piece of that?" So that's why you're seeing Swift sign with the Bears and get a bag the way he did. Saquon Barkley going to the Eagles for the contract he had. Josh Jacobs to the Packers. So these teams are looking around at the Lions and teams like that, San Francisco, and saying like that's kind of the wave right now. We got to get on
Right.
that, otherwise we're going to be left behind. So it's not often you see the Lions at the forefront of kind of transformation in the league,
Right
but
place, right time, man.
yeah, man, for
I
sure.
feel like it was bubbling a little bit before, but like they really did attack it right at the perfect time because they had the roster makeup for it. But again, like, it widens your margins at quarterback, does it not? Like Jared Goff's a good quarterback. I'm not going to say, he's on the right side of the ledger when it comes to the tiers, right? He's
Yeah,
one of the guys that you're going to pay. But no one's going to sit here and say Jared is Patrick Mahomes or even Lamar Jackson. He can't do the stuff that those guys can do. And for a long time, unless you had Tom Brady and the structure that the Belichick gave the Patriots, the wisdom was we just need a star stud quarterback or you're screwed. You can't do anything. You'll never get to the Super Bowl unless you have a star quarterback. And it's like, well,
Mhm.
what the hell is a star? To me, it's like when you see what the Lions have done with their offensive line and their run game and taken away a lot of the stuff of the pressure, for lack of a better phrase, that usually falls on the quarterback from Goff and just been like, hey, just do the basic stuff that we're asking you to do. And we were one half away from the Super Bowl. So
Yeah.
what really needs to be fixed here? It's not the identity of the team. It's not the makeup of what you did. It's really the execution of how you did it in winning time. And it's growing up and becoming more of an adult. That's the coolest part to me about where they're at right now in general. They're not trying to change anything. I don't think they're looking at like what happened last year. And I mean, I'm sure they are, right? Little things, but they're not trying to change the makeup of what they were. How they got there wasn't a fluke, right? They got there by being themselves, and they went down with the ship being themselves too, for lack of a better whatever. But there are little things that do need to change, but the identity is the identity, and that's been just like overwhelmingly clear now. I feel like to anyone who still doesn't get it, then you don't understand football, or you just want to be a contrarian. But there's few teams in the NFL right now, Colton, I don't think that have a strong, like, this is what they are, and we all know it. The
Yeah.
Lions are one of those teams, which they have never really been one of those teams, but they are right now.
They have an identity and they're not afraid of who they are. And I think to your point about just teams chasing the next Patrick Mahomes, it's like there's only
Yeah,
one dude like
there's
that.
only
Like
one
there's
Mahomes.
only
Yeah,
one Mahomes. I think a lot of GMs are gonna get themselves fired looking for the next Mahomes, just to with this
a couple
idea
already
that
have. Yeah, a couple already
yeah,
have.
for sure. Just with this idea that you have to have a guy like that to be able to win a playoff game. Like
Yep.
that's like there's so many ways to build a roster. Look at what Kyle Shanahan has done in San Francisco. I mean,
Yeah.
he's gotten to multiple Super Bowls. He hasn't won it yet, but I mean, I
He's
think a
gone a
lot of
little.
teams would
He's gone a little far in the other direction, but yes, I
sure,
agree.
sure. But the point stands that like there are different ways to win. And the fact that they've
Absolutely.
gotten that close, I'm sure a lot of teams would appreciate that sort of success if they had it, they've
Absolutely.
done it without a star quarterback, and the roster is built in a way that you can still win and compete. And they were close to winning the Super Bowl this year. They didn't do it, but they were close. The Lions were close to getting to a Super Bowl this year with the way they've done it. Not to say Jared Goff isn't a good quarterback, because he is,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the whole idea of having a Jared Goff in place and being comfortable with that guy is that you're going to build the supporting cast around him to ensure that you maximize his talents, and not just rely on one guy. That's where you can get in trouble. Look at what the Bills are doing with Josh Allen right now. They got
Absolutely.
close with Josh Allen just because he's such a talent, but talent doesn't always get you over the top.
Right. And what
Like
are the Bills?
they're
What the hell
nothing
even are
now because
they?
they're tearing
Yeah.
down, and they've gotten to a point where you wasted the rookie window with
Right.
a rookie quarterback contract. You wasted that window, couldn't win it. Now you pay Josh, and now you're having to make these cuts elsewhere, and you're not the same
Can't
team
pay
you were.
digs.
And
Yeah.
now
Right.
they're kind of trading digs and cutting all these players, and it's like they're no longer who we thought they were. Like the identity of that team is now gone. They
Right.
still have Josh Allen, but how much does that get you in this league? So I mean, we'll
Yeah.
see. But like
That's
that's sort of the idea with this roster building. There's different ways to do it, and like if you don't have a Patrick Mahomes, a singular entity that can kind of get you over the top like that, you have to adjust. And the smart ones will do that. And I think that's what we're seeing with the Lions right now.
that's the coolest part of where they're at right now because you look around the rest of the division and everybody's bulking up and everybody's rest of the division is doing a really good job of that, right? Like, I mean,
Hmm.
Chicago's done a really good job putting itself in position to make a really good upgrade here. Minnesota's going to do the same thing, and they've done what they have to do. And Green Bay has, I mean, I think are like third or fourth in terms of draft capital. They can do anything they want, and they were aggressive in free agency. So you're like, okay, everyone's loading up, and that's great. And the Lions, like you said, Colton, they've gotten the guys that they wanted. But like of all the teams that we just talked about right there, only one of them has an identity that travels and doesn't change, and you all know what it is, and it's not going to be a surprise. And that is the thing that I've always thought of when I think of like a consistent NFL football team. The Ravens always are the one that pops in my head because I think because Harbaugh's been there for so long. It's like he's been there for 20 years almost at this point. Like my whole like adult life, John Harbaugh's been the Ravens coach.
Yeah.
But they've more or less played the same brand of ball, right? They don't Lamar changed it, but he didn't change it. He did and he didn't. Like I mean, they were always a downhill, come at you, run the ball team. And even when they went through transition periods with the roster when like something got old and they had to change, it didn't matter. They found guys that like I think they have a sign on the wall that's like play like a Raven or whatever. Like that is what they're awfully close to being at. Like play like a lion. Oh my
Yeah.
god, to say something like that. But right there, man, like that's the coolest part about where they're at, because I feel like if you can continue to do those things, and we're going to talk about the draft in a second, but if you continue to add guys that fit what you're trying to do, then you're never not in that situation. And even when you're in a rough year, you're going to be a tough out. You're going to be a hard team to play, right? That's
Yeah,
staying power. And I feel like they're like, I know the Super Bowl is the next goal, and obviously that's what everyone wants to see. But the staying power's also like sort of creeping up here and becoming a thing. And I think that's important to know too.
for sure. And I think we have to give the Lions credit for like doing what they said they were going to do. Like when Dan Campbell came here, he had a list of goals and a vision for the team and how he wanted them to play, and they're playing like that now. And like it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. There's so many coaches that get up there at the podium and say we want to be a tough, hard nosed, physical
Yeah,
team.
right.
It's gonna be tough to take down, whatever. And they just aren't. It's like
Mm-mm.
I don't know how you say
The
all that and your
opposite of it.
team does
Yeah.
not reflect that in any way whatsoever. But that happens a lot of times in the NFL. And Dan had a vision for this and he said he was going to do things and he said this team's going to play a certain style and they are. So the fact that they have an identity that they're, so self-sure of, um, I think that's a product of just Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes,
I
the types
agree.
of guys that they're getting in and the collective buy-in from this team, which you don't always see elsewhere.
I agree. Okay, let's talk some draft here because it's on the horizon, uh, creeping up. It's like almost it's still a long way away, which I'm like this thing needs to happen here. This is the time of year where I'm like we need to be move. We can up the clock here now. But anyway,
Yeah.
we've got a mock draft scenario thing coming later in the week. Colton has a big board that he put out as well, and we haven't quite gone through all of these. But Colton, the first thing before we get into some of our scenarios that I would ask you that we talked about in here, um, what has changed for you post free agency in terms of what do you think they do and don't need? This is first world problems now. The Lions are a playoff team, and like it used to be, the free agency didn't impact anything in terms of what you were going to do in the draft because it didn't matter. Like now, it can change some things. How did it change, or did it change much? I should say, for your thoughts on where they might go with the draft.
Um, I think it solidified my prior belief was that they're going to go best player available. It's just a matter of
Mm-hmm.
how you get there and what you do in free agency to set yourself up for that. Which you kind of need to let the process play out, which a lot of people weren't willing to do
Yeah,
that first
no,
day of free agency. Um, but
never
they were
are.
able to get a DJ Reader and a Carlton Davis and a Meek Robertson and some of these pieces that help them kind of eliminate certain needs. And it's easy to say, yep, free agency is for needs and the draft is for talent acquisition, but that's just a simple way of how they operate. So I will say, like, I don't know. I think the Cam Sutton situation, obviously, as serious as it was, you have to wonder if that impacts things. But at the same time,
Sure.
you hear Brad Holmes talk about the cornerback position and how he talks about Amik and Carlton and how I think he and Dan both said we didn't think we'd be able to get both of those guys. We thought it was one or the other.
Right.
So we thought once we traded for Carlton Davis, Amik would kind of look at our cornerback depth and say, "Oh, I'm not going there. I'm not going to
Not
start."
gonna start. Yeah.
But his reaction was, "Are we getting this thing done or not?" Like after the Carlton Davis trade. So that's sort of the kind of competitor that he is, and obviously with Cam Sutton no longer on the roster, I think
Yeah.
those two are probably your two starters. You got Emmanuel Mosley whenever he's ready from the ACL injury. You resign Kendall Vildor. I don't think anyone will confuse it for the best cornerback room, but I think it's a little bit more serviceable. So maybe you get one more guy in there, whether it's a late first round talent that you like or a guy on day two, maybe another cornerback in there. But I mean, in terms of this draft, I think there are a few positions they can look at, and it doesn't really matter the order. It's just,
Yeah.
is this guy,
No, no.
which
We saw it
position?
last
This
year.
guy is the highest ranked player on our board. Oh, a center at 29,
Mm-hmm.
rather than a corner that we have a second round grade on. Take the center. It's like, however they have it lined up on their board, they don't have to reach for a guy or a certain position. I think that's kind of my takeaway from free agency and kind of where they're at right now.
Also, sometimes, and this is not always the case, but like, how a team spends in free agency, what they do and don't do can be indicative of how they view a class that's
Hmm.
coming out, the current class. But based on that, and based on sort of, talking to people, and we talked a little bit about this, I think, before we did our mock here. What are your thoughts on maybe where Holmes feels this draft is strong and maybe where he doesn't feel it's strong? You know what I'm saying? Because I think there's a couple spots where maybe he doesn't But I'm curious. Yeah, you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
your thoughts on all that at this point here?
Yeah. The best we can do is kind of try to read between the lines
Yeah,
because Holmes has a way of kind of telling us indirectly, but you
yeah,
kind of got to listen for it. So I remember at the end of his, his end of the year news conference with us, he was asked about kind of feeding the beast along the offensive line, um, especially as there's some questions for the future. Frank, he's on the injury report every week. He's battling something every week.
yep.
Like his toe is probably inoperable at this point. Like
Oh
it's a
God,
lot of
yeah,
stuff that's going on with him behind the
yeah,
scenes. He said he needed some time to kind of recover. Um, so between that, Kevin Zeitler, he's on a 1-year deal. He's 34. He's not a long-term option. I know he made the Pro Bowl last year, but I don't know how many years he has left.
hmm
Taylor Decker is a free agent in 2025, next offseason. Do you want to re-sign him? If you do, going to probably have to hand out a bag to him when you got some other guys that also do
yeah,
some big money contracts. Um, Graham Glasgow is, I believe, 32. I know you just re-signed him, but what if he starts to decline next year or the year after? You never know. So I'm looking at the offensive line, and Holmes was asked about that, and he goes, "Absolutely, that's a philosophy of ours. Keep feeding the beast. It's
right.
good now. How long is it going to be good in the future?"
It's got to stay good.
And so that's a position where I think they'd be very comfortable taking an offensive lineman in the first round. And I know a lot of people that don't really follow the lines closely would look and say, "Oh, they've got a great offensive line." But for the reasons I just mentioned, that's why you look at a guy that doesn't even have to start this year. I think that's the beauty of it too, because you can bring a guy in, allow him to sit for a year, learn behind some really talented guys, and let him take over for 2025 and set him up for success that way. So I think that's why that's a position that makes a lot of sense. Now, if you're looking at another position that maybe a lot of people are linking them to that might not make sense, we already mentioned cornerback, but
Yeah,
even edge.
yeah,
Um, Holmes was talking about the defensive line at the owners' meetings, and I believe he's talking about DJ Reader and that acquisition. But he in the mid conversation as he's talking about Reader, he kind of mentions James Houston. And he's like, a lot of people keep forgetting about that guy just because he was injured and he had 8 sacks as a rookie, and that's a guy that we still like. So don't forget about James Houston. So you add a James Houston back into the mix, then you add Marcus Davenport into the mix,
right.
and
And
all of a
sign him.
sudden, with Josh Pascal, a 3rd-year leap, and Holmes always tells us, that 3rd year is so important. That's the year where you can finally tell if a guy is ready or not. We'll see if Pascal can make that leap. Aiden Hutchinson's already there. So it's like, I think he feels better about the edge position than a lot of people think.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So those two positions, like, all right, they're probably leaning into offensive line and maybe back away from edge. That's just me reading between the lines. I have no idea. They could obviously just flip flop that,
Right.
but we're trying our best to kind of pick apart some of these conversations and try to get a feel for what they want, which is kind of fun for us. But we'll
Yeah.
see what they ultimately do.
It's when I look at it and I look at what they do, what they like, what they don't like typically, I don't think they're going to love the cornerback class. I don't think they're going to, and I don't know if they're going to take one at 29. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that they're going to not do it. I think that you could come back in the second round, and we talked about how they could move too, and I think that that's certainly possible to move off of 29 or move around, from some of your back end picks to move back up.
Mhm.
Usually Holmes doesn't mess with the day three stuff too often. He's like, we're done
Yeah.
after Friday. But I think there's a lot that they could do. But I also don't think, when I look at the edge in the cornerback class, I'm not sure that there's too many guys there on either side that they're going to love. In the maybe even the first two picks. And so that's been something that for me, as I got deeper into the class, and I worried about this, I should say, a little bit as the season went on, because you knew they were going to be in the market for an edge, probably, right, and a corner.
Mhm.
The cornerback class I like better than the edge class, but this edge class is just, man, it's tough. It's not. There's
Yeah.
not a lot there that you're like, whoa, look at this freaking guy. We gotta have this guy.
Yeah.
Just not happening. I mean, the top guy in the class is Dallas Turner. I don't even know if he's going to go in the top 10. I don't know if Jared Verse is going to go in the top 20. Maybe, but there's no promise there. Those guys are not guys and those guys are the best guys in this class by a bit. So it's
Yeah.
not the edge class that I think that maybe we've seen other years. So I'm not sure if we'll see exactly what you think they need drafted in the first two picks. I guess what I'm saying here on
Yeah.
April 4th to people to people out there. So I'm not sure how much they're going to love this cornerback class, and I don't think they're going to love this edge class, at least at the top.
Yeah, and a lot of us like to mention, hey, the Lions haven't drafted a corner in the
Yeah,
top 100
right.
picks since Okuda in 2020. So before this regime was even here, because I think Iffy was like 101, but
Yeah,
that's
and he's a
nitpicking a
safety.
little
Doesn't
bit.
count.
But he's a safety now, so there's also that. But I don't know. It's like they tried last year. If Devin Witherspoon were there at 6, he would have been the pick.
Yes. Yep. For
He
sure.
would have been their guy. He went 5th overall, and they adjusted. They didn't reach for a guy they didn't love there.
Right.
Christian Gonzalez probably would have been a perfectly fine pick there. They didn't love him. So at least not at that position. So they're like, okay, let's trade back down to 12. We still think we can get Jahmyr Gibbs at 12. They heard that he might go, to the Jets, I think at 15 or something like that. Didn't think he would be there by 18. Let's take Gibbs here. We pick up the extra pick in the second, 34th overall. Let's get an all-pro tight end, Sam Laporta,
Right.
in here, and let's cook. So, like, they're always going to stick to their board. They're not going to reach for a certain player. And I think that was something Holmes mentioned at the owners' meetings, and he spoke with so much conviction. And that's why I'm just like, you
Very
can see
confident
it.
now.
Yeah. And it's like, why should we? And even like the injury bug, a lot of people are like, why do you keep taking injured players? Like, why do you love these guys? And it's like, for him, he kind of mentioned, so why would I take a guy that we don't love, that I don't know if is gonna even be a good player in this league, at a certain position, when I have another guy ranked higher than him that just happened to have a slight injury that he's going to need time to recover from? Why would I take the worst guy? It
Well,
sounds so
right.
simple coming from him, but that's just how they operate. No, I'm going to take the guy. He's going to get healthy and he's going to be a stud for us. Like, that's kind of how he views it. But it's the same way, healthy or not. Just like, why would I take another edge like a Tyree Wilson, um, when I don't know if he's going to be a good NFL player? And based on our conversations with our team, we determined he's not a good fit at
He
6.
doesn't fit. Yeah. Right.
So why would I take him just because you guys tell me I need an edge? No, I'm going to trade down, get a running back that's going to be a rookie Pro Bowler and help our team elsewhere. So that's kind of how they operate. And hearing him talk about it, like, again, it seems so simple, but like, that's how good teams are good. Like, they don't reach
100%.
for needs in the draft. They take the best player available on their board based on the work they've done. Now, you have to have smart people in the building. Otherwise, you end up drafting bad players anyway. But they feel like they do, and their track record speaks for itself at this point. So I think that's why they're comfortable, speaking the way they do and operating the way they do. So, I mean, that's kind of, we've been doing this for what, 3-4 years now. So it's like we kind of got a feel for it. So yeah.
The absolute worst thing you can do is draft a guy that doesn't fit what you're doing. Like, that's the worst thing you can do, period.
Yeah.
And I just don't think these guys will ever do that. I mean, they've never shown, that they've had many opportunities. I can think back to the first draft, not just the first round pick with Panay, but there were many other chances as you go down the board for some guys where they stuck to their guns and they took guys they wanted. Aleem, I think, was one. I'm not sure if they moved up for him or Levi, but whatever. There were other guys at that spot that we were all like, oh, that's a way better, better ranked player. He's higher ranked in terms of, like, he's a better overall talent, whatever it was at the time that we judged it. But, like, he's not a better fit for what they're trying to do right now than Aleem McNeil. So that's
Right.
what they did.
Michael Mayer last year, a lot of people were
Right.
mad they didn't take him. They took
Yeah.
Laporta.
And on and on. And it's
Yeah.
like over and over. And it's just like, I don't see a situation here. And, our first scenario was we started off with offensive line. Jackson Powers Johnson, the center from Oregon. He fits. I don't know what that's going to mean for immediately next year, but, like, you make it work and he fits what you're trying to do. Like, so you take him. Like, and if he's not there or if it's not whatever, you try to get off the pick and you move back. Like, I feel like that's sort of what's going to happen here at the beginning. If one of these corners falls that they like that will fit, they'll do it. But I don't think that's going to happen. You know what I'm saying? I don't see it. So I don't think they're going to love anybody outside of the top 2, possibly. Just
yeah. You're at the mercy of the board, right? Like,
are.
picking
Yeah.
29. It's a little different than 6 or 12 or 18. So,
Yeah.
maybe they do have a couple corners that they love. Maybe it's Terry and Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell, but those guys look like top 15, top 20 prospects that you might have to trade up for if you actually want them. Maybe they do like Leatu Latu from UCLA, the edge. But if he goes, 21st or something like that, you're shit out of luck. So it's like,
what are you gonna do?
I don't know. Yeah. What are you gonna do? You gotta play your board, take a player that you really love, no matter the position, and say, we're gonna get you in here and we're gonna make it work. Now, A lot of people would want to see a corner, they'd want to see an edge, but as we've seen, they're going to do what they want to do. And that's kind of the bottom line here. We've seen them do it time and time again, and they're not going to change that process just because they're now a contender. That process doesn't change. That's how you get away from what works so well for you.
Yeah.
So I expect them to completely stick to what they've been doing and what's been working for them.
Let's stick on the Powers Johnson thing for a second here and that whole scenario, because as someone who has been bringing up maybe they'll draft a tackle every single year, even after they drafted Panay, because I'm like, maybe they'll draft another one because you can never have too many.
Probably
like,
should.
I mean, yeah, like it's like I'm always of the mind exactly what Holmes was talking about. Of if you want to have a good offensive line, it's got to stay good and it's got to stay young, and that means you have to make hard decisions, business decisions, and that was Jonah Jackson is one of them. And I don't think Jonah Jackson wasn't a fit. I think he did fit with everything they were trying to do, but at the price and the age, you got to make hard decisions. You got to get younger. And when you look at a guy like Frank Ragnow, who is, like you just said, Colton, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, you don't know how much longer you're going to have him. So, the Eagles just did this with Jason Kelsey, who obviously is much older. But they drafted Juergens,
Cam Juergens, yeah,
from Nebraska a couple years ago. I think I read that Howie even consulted Kelsey on if he thought this kid could play, and put him at guard right next to Kelsey for the last 2 years, and he's learned from the best friggin' center of the spread generation. Okay, one of the best centers that's ever played the game. Yep. He's going to take over next year, and they're not going to miss much of a beat. They're not going to have Jason Kelsey anymore, but they're going to miss a lot less of a beat than you think up in the middle like that, right? They're still going to be just like what they've always been, strong up the middle. If they're not, it won't be because of the center situation. It'll be other problems. The Lions have an opportunity to kind of maybe do this. I would not do this without talking to Frank. I wouldn't do this without consulting him completely and totally and just being like, if you don't want us to do this, we won't do it. And if you think that this is weird, and if I could sense that he thought it was weird, I wouldn't do it, all that sort of stuff. But, ideally, you'd like to say, okay, if you can give us 3 more years, and I'd love to get the guy that's going to take over for you in here so you can play with him for 2 years, and you can teach him, and he can learn from you. And then I also think Frank's a guy that whenever he is done with the Lions will be part of the organization. I think ideally for them, I think they would love him to retire as a player with the Lions, be it at 29 or 39. And then when Frank's done, I think they would love for him to continue and be part of the organization. So I think that if you sell it and you path it out like that, he's a team guy. I think that makes a lot of sense if you can pull it off. And I think they're in an interest. It's probably earlier than anyone would have wanted it to happen because he's not that old, and maybe it won't happen. Maybe Frank comes back this, or, in a couple weeks or whatever, and says, I don't care. I'm ready to go. Maybe not. I don't know. But it's got to be looked at, right? I mean, and that's the logic behind it.
It does, and it doesn't hurt to look ahead. It never hurts to look ahead. That's what smart organizations do. I think even last year, we might have been a little premature on this, but we definitely compared the Lions to the Eagles last year and said they're getting close. They're maybe not there yet, but they're getting close to where they can kind of get into this draft replacement early.
Yeah.
Not just the year of, so that when a Kelsey retires, you have the ready-made prospect that's been waiting in the wings for a couple of years, ready to go. So now, I look at this Lions roster. I think PFF gave them 8 top 100 players, which was either second or tied for first. So you look at the roster; it's pretty strong right now. They got the depth; it's getting there. With a draft like this, you can definitely even add to that even further and just say we don't have a ton of holes or places where we need starters. Like last year's draft to me was about getting starting caliber players with the top 4, which is what they did. But I think this year it's all right, now we can finally get to that place if we want to go that route where we can draft replacements. And whether that's at center or tackle, maybe cornerback, if you have the 2 guys starting this year and then you kind of figure that out down the road. An edge, if Davenport's only here for 1 year, you can get a guy that's ready to start next year. They have so many different options that they can go and to try to enact that plan. I think it's a smart thing if they want to go that route, but I also understand if they just want to try to get some more dudes that can compete and push for starting time right away because they are a team that can win now. So however they want to go about this, I'm all for it. I think they have a couple options that make sense, but in terms of the draft replacement now type of plan, I think that's something that could bode well for them.
Yeah, I think they can spend. I think they can maybe start spending some of the premium picks on that sort of thing, or at least looking at doing that. And you can also draft your needs later on the board, and that's where you just trust your scouting because you know the edge class. We can talk about that in a second, but the cornerback class, you know, I don't think they're going to love it at the top, but that doesn't mean that there's not good players in here, and that doesn't mean that there's not going to be good players on day 2 and day 3. You know what I'm saying? Or guys that can help you win games, right? Like, and I think
Yeah.
that that's essentially going to be what they zero in on here. Like, I think that they're going to try to maybe play their own board at corner. Is my gut? That's what I'm. I would be a little surprised. Maybe they trade up for Quinion or Arnold, or maybe they love Wiggins. I don't know. I doubt it. And again, I don't think Cooper is going to be a guy that necessarily fits what they're going to do. Because again, I don't. We talked about this. I think he can play some outside corner, but if you're asking him to do it all the time, you're going to cause problems. I don't know if Kool-Aid necessarily fits what they like to do. Maybe Rakestraw does, but he's not that fast. So you know what I'm saying? As we
It's
go
like they
on
all
here,
have some
they
sort of
all have
question
a
mark.
flaw.
Yeah.
And if you go down the board, like we keep talking about Renardo Green or Jerry and Jones, the Florida State kids. Well, who's to say if they're not there in 4th or 5th round? Like those are good quality football players. I don't know if they're going to be like a shutdown corner for the rest of their career, but they can help you win games.
Yep.
And they are young, hungry replacement level players that are going to come in and compete their butts off. Like I think they're going to take their swings at corner and at edge in this class, but deep, like not at the top. And maybe that's how they go from here on out. Will just be like, and I think that's kind of what the Eagles have tried to do under Howie is like you spend your premium picks on the spots that you know are going to need it, and then you scout the hell out of the rest of the board and just find that's really the secret is just being the best scout ultimately at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
I do think that corner and edge will be addressed, right? I just don't think necessarily early, and I can feel the panic happening from some folks if that doesn't happen already. Maybe not, but I mean, I feel like that's probably going to happen. Am I wrong?
I would hope that after last year we've kind of learned our lesson, right? Like everyone out there. I still remember what's that one account? ML Football, with all
I
these
don't
like
know.
aggregator
Oh
accounts
yeah.
called the Lions draft like the worst of all time or one of the worst ever. Like after not even after the draft, after just day one.
God, yeah. After the
After
first
Gibbs
round,
and
yeah.
Campbell, like didn't even wait for Laporta to France or anything like that. So I would hope that we don't overreact and we just kind of let the process play out. But I know that's a lot to ask.
Yeah,
But
it is a lot to ask.
yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we will see. Okay, so let's talk about some of these guys that we do like, maybe at edge here. We ended up talking about Marshawn Nealand. We talked about, I believe we had Chop at some point. We talked a little bit about Braswell from Alabama, and a couple other guys maybe in that mid-round range. Who are some of the guys, Colton, that you like or you've thought about maybe for them that would fit? And you remember talking about they bringing in Davenport, but we're also talking about a guy that plays opposite Aiden Hutchinson. Houston is obviously still there, but that's sort of the fit that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're looking for guys that aren't redundant to what you already have.
Right.
Um, so there's like I don't know the Utah edge, Jonah
Yeah, Luther
Ellis, is
Ellis'
that his name?
son. Yeah, Jonah.
Yeah. Um, he kind of reminds me of Houston a little bit. Like, so there's some guys like that where it's like, maybe they like what they have and they won't get another guy like a smaller edge that's
A
fast off
smaller
the
guy.
edge.
Yeah.
You know, um, I don't know if they're gonna love Chop's lack of production.
Right.
At the college level, they usually go for guys that are a little bit more, polished at that position. Um, we talked about Darius Robinson a little bit. And I think he's a big
He's a
body
tough one.
type. He's six
Yeah.
five, can play different positions. Maybe they look at a guy like Pascal. I know he's bigger than Pascal, but maybe they say we already got the inside out guy that we need.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe let's just pass on that for now. So it's kind of like you're looking at some of the edges that could be there at 29 or in the second round, and I don't know if there are a ton of fits, which makes it kind of hard to
Right.
kind of, and maybe that's why they, Brad's talking about the edges that they already have,
Right.
and
Yeah.
Davenport's potential and whatnot if he stays healthy. But I do like Marshawn Nealand.
Yeah.
I think
As
he's a
well.
guy that could realistically maybe be there at 61. Maybe he's a little higher on some teams' boards, but if he's there, they're familiar with him because he's an in-state kid. Met with him at the combine. Has a high motor, gets after it. So I think a lot of the qualities that they like, he has. So that's why we kind of pegged him for the second round, 61. in one of these mock scenarios. But
Yeah.
I mean, he's a guy, if you're looking a little later, could be an option, especially if you strike out on some of the top guys.
Top
They don't
guys,
make
yeah.
it to 29 there.
I feel like there's a bunch of guys with the edge class that are going to be there on day 3 that might interest them. Jalix Hunt, the kid from Houston Christian, is like really freaky. He's got like almost 35-inch arms. Um, Super, like I think he was a near 40-inch vert, that sort of stuff, like 6'4",
Mm.
250. But again, like sort of played at a small school and who knows, that sort of thing. Another one would be a guy like Jalen Harrell, the kid from Michigan here, who like has some pass rush to his game and can get up there. He was a situational pass rusher that can drop and cover a bit. But I feel like what you're trying to find long term is someone who complements Aiden Hutchinson, is someone who does what you hope Houston is going to do. Essentially, is just get up there and pin his ears back and go get the quarterback. So Aiden, you're not escaping Aiden. Aiden should be the, you know what I mean? Like you're running away from the guy who's coming at you at 100 miles an hour, and you're not escaping the guy on the other side of the wall, who is Hutchinson. So to me, it's you're trying to find a guy who's got all that gas, and there's not a ton of those guys in this class. Like Javin Solomon is a kid from Troy who didn't test as well as I thought maybe he would. Muhammad Kamara, who's small, but like again, it's not a lot of guys here, man. But I do think that there's probably a few late that I could see them taking a shot at. But it wouldn't surprise me if they don't. That's another one where I'm like, they've signed some guys. It wouldn't shock me if they don't draft an edge at all in this class.
Yeah.
If they, especially if the one they like doesn't fall to them.
I've kind of learned that when they make these moves in free agency, they're preparing themselves to say, we're good on that position. We're not going to draft a guy. So you can afford to kick the can down the road for another year if you want to. Now you're asking a lot of Davenport to stay healthy.
Yeah.
That's the one thing, because he hasn't done it. Even his breakout year in 2021, I think he only played like 11 games. So
still limited.
If you're banking on just half a season worth of production, I don't know if that's going to work out. But that's the only reason why I would say maybe try to get one more guy, whether it's on day 2 or late round guy on day 3. Who knows? But I don't know. I feel like they could use another body. I just don't know if they want another body.
Right. I mean, I think on the priority list, I would certainly have corner ahead of it, because I do think, like we touched on the Florida State kids, but there's some other ones there. Max Melton, I like him from Rutgers. Andrew Phillips from Kentucky, I like him a lot.
Yep.
Abrams Drain, one of your dudes there from Mizzou. Pritchett from Auburn. There's some guys on third roundish that might slip into the 4th round even. I could see them taking a couple swings at corner still in this draft, even though they signed who they signed. I could still see them taking some of these guys and taking their time with them and saying, like, if he took a lot longer than anybody wanted him to take, but the plan was still to take their time with him. So maybe you put him on the iffy plan to a degree. I could see them doing that with some of these guys, especially late, but like in the middle there. Like if like a Cam Hart slides, the kid from Notre Dame.
Yep. Long
he's
dude,
really
6'3".
athletic and long. I could certainly see them wanting to take a shot at him, a guy like that. Or the kid from Louisville, I liked him, Brownlee.
Yeah.
So like there's some other guys in there too. I don't know if you've got any others, but I do think corner is still one. The edge class is rough, but I think corner, maybe not at the top, but I definitely think it's going to get addressed. I just kind of don't know where.
So let me ask you this, because I think the problem with a lot of those day 2 corners is like, can they stick on the outside? Are they more zone corners? Are they the man?
Too.
Yeah. Are they nickels, or are they outside corners? Do they play? Do they excel in man or zone? So when you're looking at the lines of fit, we kind of have determined they want to play more man, just based on comments that we've heard. And I don't know if they're going to want a nickel because they already have Brian Branch. But then the other part of that equation is that at the owners' meetings, Campbell kind of mentioned them wanting to play Branch more at safety. Now, I don't know if that's as the emergency, third option behind the 2 starters that you have in Kirby and Iffy, or maybe if they just kind of view him as a long-term safety.
I wonder if we would like to do Iffy and Branch in some sort of cool rotation to where they all stay on the field at the same time, and it's really maybe I don't know. But yes, they're going to be on the field a lot together.
Yeah. But Campbell was saying, we drafted him with this idea that he could play nickel and safety. Right. We tried him at safety a little bit. It didn't seem like he was ready, so they kind of just wanted to leave him at nickel and say, take your time. You're already good there. We know you are, so just like get comfortable there. and when you're ready, we'll try you out at safety a little bit more. And so he's talking this offseason like he's going to try to get some more snaps at safety. Because they think he has the smarts and the instincts to play the position. Sure. It's just a matter of getting there. And he mentioned C.J. Gardner-Johnson and him in New Orleans and how we put him at nickel to start, but you see him now. He's a safety. He can play nickel still. Now he has that combo versatility. So I think that's what they see with Branch. Campbell made that comparison himself. So it's like, I don't know what that means for Kirby and Iffy, if they're just trying to make a rotation there, or if that opens the door. Yeah. But it could open the door for them to maybe go for a nickel. Sure, and just a guy with some inside-outside versatility, where it's like we can put him on the outside for a little bit if we have an injury. We can bump him to nickel and have a package for him, and then move Branch back to safety, take one of the other safeties off the field. I think that versatility and just in terms of getting the best players on the field at once is something that might be intriguing to them. So if there is a corner with that inside-outside versatility in the second or third round that they want, I wouldn't be surprised to see them take a swing, even though for us it might be like, oh, he's a nickel. It's like, no, we like that versatility and the interchangeability of those positions. So,
yeah, there's some that are probably going to be eliminated. Like we get asked about Sanders still a lot.
Yeah,
just probably because he's from Michigan, but also like because of his competitive sort of character, as a player, and how much that would absolutely fit what they do.
Yeah,
he's one that would totally fit everything they're about in terms of like football, but. He's 5'9", 182, and I don't know if he can go line up outside and play outside corner. Maybe, but I'm not sure. And like some of them are going to be eliminated based on that. I feel like I think that what you maybe want, like to your point, is if you can find a guy who's got some length that can play, that's been a nickel, then yeah, I think if the versatility is ultimately what you're trying to find here is guys that can play and wear as many hats as possible.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. It's just finding those guys is tough, man. Like,
yeah, I know.
Finding the right fit. Yeah, for sure.
All right. So another thing that we looked at two other spots. One, obviously, we'll talk about the offensive line there in a second, but receiver comes up again for them, and they did re-sign Josh Reynolds. Doesn't necessarily mean they are still not in need of help at the position. Did they resign Josh Reynolds, or am I making that up?
No.
Oh, okay.
Josh Reynolds signed with the Broncos 2-year deal.
Oh, I made that up?
I think you did.
What was I thinking?
They signed DPJ, Donovan Peoples-Jones.
That's what I was thinking, not Josh Reynolds. They signed Donovan Peoples-Jones, and they did not sign Josh Reynolds. Okay, so that's what we assumed would happen, right? What the hell was I thinking here? So brain freeze on my part. So exactly where we thought they could be at wide receiver. They still need help at wide receiver. And we've talked about this offensive tackle class being outstanding. And everyone has also talked again about this wide receiver class being outstanding, which is an annual thing at this point. But again, it is, and it's not unlike the one where they got St. Brown, where there was a billion guys, all shapes and sizes, all types. There's something for everyone in this class. Who are some of your favorite receivers, Colton? And how high do you think they could go at receiver maybe in this class?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, I still think Combs really wants that X. Like, he's been looking for it for years. He's tried different bodies and hasn't really worked out. I still think he likes DPJ. Like, he traded for him last year and re-signed him this year. So, he's got an 800-yard season under his belt. So I wouldn't rule him out just yet. But in terms of this draft, I think there are a few guys. Like, I think they'd love Ryan Thomas Jr. from LSU, but I don't think he's going to fall to them at 29. Adonai Mitchell, I think I struggle with him because he's got everything to look for: size, speed, separation skills.
He's got some Jameson in him, I think.
But he takes some routes off, man. He really does. And it's like, that doesn't scream line to me. But maybe Holmes just
not right away.
Not right away. He's going to need some time, right? And it's like, how patient do you want to be with another receiver when you're already impatient with JMO? And JMO's just now getting here in year three. So it's like,
and he nearly killed everyone on the way there, basically.
Yeah. A lot of growing pains, we'll say that.
Right.
So I struggle with him a little bit, but I do like his upside, and he's got all the things you look for. Sure. Xavier Legette from South Carolina. Mm-hmm. We mentioned him in our mock dropping tomorrow. I think he's a little shorter than people thought. Like, I think South Carolina listed him at 6'3", and I think he measured in at 6'1". But he's it doesn't matter because he's 220 and he runs like hell. Like, he's 4.39, 4.38. And he's got the build you look for. He can go up and get it. It doesn't matter that he's only 6'1". He can go up and get it. He's physical. He can take a hit, deliver a hit, and run by you. So like a lot to like there. Um, and I've seen Leggett mocked. I think Mel Kiper had him mocked to the Lions at 29, which seems
That feels really high to me. But
high to me. I
yeah,
think Dane might have like a day 2 or a day 2 grade
it's
on
day
him.
2 for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see there. His range is kind of over the place. Javon Baker is from UCF.
Yep, he's a good player.
Yep, I like him. Maybe later on if you're looking for guys down the road. Um, so yeah, I mean there are a few receivers I think in this class that make sense for them. It just matter what they look for. So there's so many times where I'm just like Lab McConkey, like he's a guy that might not scream. You know, he's
Oh,
not the X receiver, but like if you're just worried about guys separating and getting open, he's your guy and he will be
100%.
available. So it's like it's different flavors, but it's just what you want ultimately. And I think, we'll see what they ultimately do, but there are a lot of receivers that can help this team and make an impact from day one just based on the open position that Josh Reynolds left by leaving.
Right.
So
And again, I am still very curious to see if we don't see them spend a premium pick at some point on another guy that's exactly like Amon Ra,
yeah.
another guy that's exactly like that. Like there are guys in this class that have those traits, like Roman Wilson, Malachi Corley, Worthy to a degree, but not quite. That's that Ricky Purcell from Florida.
From Florida.
Like there are guys in this class that have that. Like they, Vlad is the best one, McConkey, and he
Yeah.
might go in the first round because of it. It's the quarterback friendliness, the stuff that they always talk about with St. Brown. They're always downhill. They never drop anything. When they do, it looks like their world has ended. Like, like they're so quick in and out of breaks. They know exactly what they're trying to do. They understand leverage, how to read coverage, like when to break in, when to break out. Like they're never in the wrong spot. They make plays for their quarterback all the freaking time. A lot of
Yeah.
these guys played for bad quarterbacks or quarterbacks that threw the ball all over the place and they had to go get it. Jalen Polk, another one from Washington, there with Penix. So there's a lot of guys that have some of that to their game that are not necessarily an X. Like I don't know if Vlad McConkey's going to be an X. He's a little lighter than Amon Ra. Like he's a little bit taller but a little bit lighter. Roman Wilson can't be an X. Corley probably not either. But these are guys that could play Z and slot and do some other things for you, and they'll block. And so when I look at the Lions, I think they do want an X. Like to your point, Colton, I think on the roster they want a guy that can a big, tall, long guy that can stretch. And maybe they find one somewhere in the draft. Maybe it is premium. But I won't be shocked at some point, and maybe it is this year, maybe it's down the road. Not because they want to replace St. Brown, because I think they're going to try to resign him this year, but because I think they want to have another one of him. Like, if you imagine, like if Jamison Williams should be the X here. Like that should be right. Ideally, he bulks up, he gets everything going, he's healthy. He's the guy that blows the top off. If you put two guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown running around
Underneath.
Gibbs and Sam Laporta, no one is defending you. That to me is maybe where I would go. But I don't know. You could do either or, I guess. You could do both if you wanted to, really, in this class too.
I see the vision. JMO probably needs to eat like 12 McJamos a day to get there.
Yeah, right. With extra hot fudge on there or whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, they still have DPJ who can kind of play some of that if they want it. So I think just the versatility, and again, if you have Sam Laporta, St. Brown, and another one of those, yards after catch guys working underneath while you have JMO stretching the field, that almost might fit Goff's like skill set more.
More, yes.
Because I don't know if he necessarily needs, a jump ball winner. Like Keon Coleman, Coleman has some issues separating, right? I think he's getting a lot of hate, which I don't think is entirely deserved.
Yeah,
but
there's some
at the same time,
game, but he's young too.
He's just kind of raw. I think he can get there in time. You gotta be patient with him. But he does have trouble separating right now. Mm-hmm. And he is more of a jump ball winner than I'm a beat you with this route type of guy. And Goff is kind of hesitant to make some of those 50-50 throws, unless he really trusts you.
Right.
So if you're looking at what they have at quarterback, and we see what he was able to do with Laporta and what he can do after the catch, and St. Brown with the crossers, if you had just one more guy like that, and you just say, JMO, you're at a place now where we can trust you to do what you want. Just run around the field, JMO. We'll get you sometimes. Maybe sometimes you're more of a decoy, but our offense is going to keep going if we add one more guy like that. So I don't know if they need the X. I think Holmes wants that. I don't know if they need it. So I would not be surprised if they go with McConkey or Purcell or one of these other guys that can
Man,
just separate. So
like Lad McConkey in that offense would be a
yeah,
lot of fun.
he'd be awesome.
Yeah, I just and
Did we just talk
Purcell's.
ourselves into Lad? I
I
think
Yeah, probably Purcell's one that has grown on me a lot over the last after this. The Senior Bowl was a big one for me for him because he was one where you watch him at Florida and you're like, man, he is cooking people. But like,
mhm.
has he got this guy in a? I don't know what's going on here because sometimes I guess it doesn't always happen, or maybe it was the quarterback situation again. He's playing an offense that's just not any good. But there's a couple games there where you're like, holy shit, this guy is doing everything. And
Yeah,
it's a lot of just precision. And then he goes to Senior Bowl and he just killed everybody. Nobody, I think he may have been the MVP of or at least he was on one of the days offensively. So, like,
mhm.
that type of guy that can just get down there. And there's some young guys or some guys on the bottom of the board, too. Malik Washington, Taj Washington, some smaller guys that are like, if you can get underneath and cause problems for people with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta and a burnt man, like that to me is what you try to do. Like there's so many guys in this class that have that after catch ability and they're consistent football players. Like this is the COVID backlog class. So you are going to get in your offensive line and really everywhere, but at the positions where you have to have it, line, receiver, you're going to get seasoned players that play a lot of ball. Like there's a lot of guys that you're going to see when the beast comes out. Oh, dude's had 60 starts. What? Like, you know what I'm saying? Guy's been in college for 7 years or
Yeah,
whatever. Like a lot of these guys, they're ready to go. Like so, you can wait and find some guys that have some flaws that are just football players. And I think this is going to be a great draft for that if you are patient and the board sort of breaks your way.
yeah. Again, the smart GMs will cook with a draft
Yeah,
like this,
I
right?
think
Like
so.
this seems like one of those years where
I
it's going to
agree.
separate some dudes for sure.
I agree. Well, we'll find out how it all goes. I think that'll do it for this week. Got anything else, Colton, for this week before we get out of here?
I'm all good. No,
No, Chris this week. He was editing, so we'll get him back here. Maybe a little bit here before draft. We'll maybe try to get more weekly here as the draft runs up. But yeah, you got anything else coming this in the hopper, Colton, or that you're working on here in particular? You want to shout out?
a few things in the works, but I'll keep those under wraps for
Okay,
now.
well there you go. A few things in the works. We got some stuff coming.
Little
Some
teaser.
some more athletic stuff coming, but yeah, stay tuned for the Beast. That'll be out soonish. I don't know when, but it'll be out at some point. Happy draft season to everyone. Thanks again for listening. For Colton, I'm Nick. Take care, and we'll talk to you later.